From unpaid athletes to six-figure deals, college sports was flipped upside down in 2021 with the introduction of NIL after public pressure and a lot of historical changes. I am Nichols student Gabe Dowd, and to my right is fellow Nichols student Nicholas Walters, who will be joining me today to explain why NIL legislation is good or bad for college sports and college athletes.
NIL includes endorsements, social media posts, and sponsorships for college athletes as sort of a repayment for their efforts on the practice field, in private, and on game day.
All right, so the history of NIL, as I just mentioned with the intro, before NIL, pre-2021, college athletes could not make money off of endorsements consisting of social media, autographs, appearances, or anything that had to do with image or likeness, such as video games, posters, YouTube videos, Destroying being one of those examples that our generation resonates with. This was a contradiction because, big schools were making money off of jerseys, ticket sales, TV deals, broadcasting rights. Players were being suspended for participating in any of these forms of making money. So the big picture here, athletes could not make money at all, and schools and organizations were making money off of them. This was causing a lot of controversial topics for the families of these athletes and a lot of us consumers around the sports world, because we want to play the video games that have our favorite college athletes in it. We want to buy the jerseys to support these players. However, not a percentage or a cut was going to these players, and this was something that did not sit well with endorsements, the athletes themselves, their families, and even a percentage of the consumers in NCAA athletics. Absolutely. May not be everyone, but a good percentage of it.
We have a couple of examples. Both are former college football players, first being former USC running back Reggie Bush, who lost his Heisman Trophy due to improper benefits he received. But he got his trophy back on April 24th, 2024, after the implementation of the NIL we know today. The second being former Texas A&M quarterback Johnny Manziel, who was suspended for making money off of autographs. And he was actually suspended for the first half of the 2013 season opener when they played Rice.
I mean, we saw a huge Netflix documentary about this and all the complexities that went into this. I mean, this wasn't just like a little scandal. This was something to do with his manager, who ended up being one of his longtime childhood best friends, traveling with rappers, celebrities, just trying to make a quick buck off of jerseys and autograph sales. Johnny Manziel came to the realization, holy crap, I'm getting money made off of my name, my number, and all the history I'm making on that field. And I'm not getting anything for it. And, most young kids, most young athletes who are going pro think, why not make money now? How can I do that? How can I capitalize on this college career that I have right now in this short window? And for him, it was, I'm going to go make the money that they're not allowing me to make behind the scenes, because he, quite frankly, wasn't getting caught until he made a pretty decent amount of time before he got caught, as we saw. So good or bad, these athletes want to make their money. They want to be noticed and give the credit ultimately for the product they're putting on the field that we're all enjoying and the schools are capitalizing off of, as well as Nike, broadcast people like ESPN, CBS Sports, on all these outlets. They want to have a fair trade-off. So the introduction of NIL happened to be in the 2021 rule change, which came through the O'Bannon versus NCAA case. There's a class action lawsuit against the NCAA to lift the restriction of athletes not being able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, being the term NIL that we know today. Following that, we have the NCAA versus Alston case. This case did not create NIL, but it helped kind of destroy the NCAA's legal footing that was helping them to keep NIL prohibited from athletes, as it violated the antitrust laws. And as we know, if there's any violation or prohibitions with laws in our constitutions or anything with titles, that becomes a huge issue, and now the NCAA has to reverse that. So this is how it opens up the door for NIL post-2021 getting to where we are now. So I'm going to start with a couple schools that capitalized on it and dove right in quickly. Some of the big hitters that we know for sure are the Texas Longhorns, Texas A&M, Georgia, and LSU. A couple other schools that I don't know for sure, but I know they got some NIL percentage at this time, the Florida Gators and the Alabama Crimson Tide, as we know, are big powerhouse schools capitalizing. I'm sure Michigan was probably one other school that was in the mix of that, but let's get into why NIL exists.
The big thing is fairness, right? College athletes put the work in, like I said earlier, practice field by themselves and on game day. They made the game what it is. They put butts in seats. They are the reason people watch. And all these schools and the NCAA itself were making money off of their likeness. That's not really fair. The players themselves weren't making any of the money off of it. And there was a lot of public pressure around this. People were not happy that these players were not being compensated for their hard work and for their likeness. And now we see NIL as it is today.
Now, how NIL works, Athletes sign deals with these brands such as Nike, Under Armour, New Balance. We just visited with Boston College.
Yep.
Their main endorsement being New Balance. So some of these athletes will make their money through signing with brands such as that. They also be promoted on social media, whether it be through their page or through these brands' pages. So athletes will get sent sports products. They will review them, use them in their content. They will then be, they'll get paid for that as compensation. They'll also appear in ads, events such as commercials, billboards we see on the highways as we drive down the streets, and things of that nature. So a big example is how we see some of our favorite college athletes on like Cane's commercials, Nike ads, stuff like that. So there's fun spinoffs and there's the more serious promotional relationships that we see. So those are some prominent NIL deals that we see that make a ton of money, and that's how they actually get involved in NIL. Sorry, mouthful there. Another great example that I don't have on our doc, but I think is one to point out: EA Games.
Yes.
The NCAA college football video game. Each player who was in the game made around $600, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they did.
That's another example of how NIL works and how all these players can get compensation for their name, image, and likeness. Now,
let's start with the cons. So big stars can make more than some of the lower end players that may be putting in equal or even more work to the stars. And that you kind of get in a little gray area when it comes to fairness, as we mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. There are also recruiting advantages. Some schools have more money than others. The bigger players are going to be more drawn into those schools to make the most money possible. There's less focus on classwork. The classroom is the most important thing there, called student athletes for a reason.
You're the college for a reason. You're the college for a reason.
Exactly. It also gives it a more professional feel. You feel like you're more of a football player or a swimmer or whatever than a student, which is really what college is all about. Getting on to some of the pros, athletes can finally make some money back for putting all this work in, as we've mentioned throughout this clip. It also helps athletes who may be from low-income backgrounds. Maybe they help out their family. Maybe if they didn't get a full-ride scholarship, they can pay some of their student tuition. It also helps build their brands, businesses they might have, and it helps them network around, maybe with coaches in professional leagues, maybe just influencers as a whole to get their name out there. And that brings us to our conclusions.
I was going to say, so as we can see, there's two sides to every coin.
Yeah.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Our opinions. So everyone has an opinion. And I think the best way to close out this video on how NIL works is to close out with our opinion on NIL. So I would be remiss if I didn't start with you, Nick. What are your opinions on name, image, and likeness and college athletes being paid for what they do in their respective sport?
My personal opinion is, if the athlete is on scholarship, especially a full ride, they should not be getting NIL deals. They are already getting money from the school. That is enough for them. If you're not on a scholarship, maybe you can get a little bit of NIL, but not millions and millions of dollars as we're seeing today. I think that is absolutely absurd, and it needs to stop because the game is being ruined because of it. So
I sway a little bit different. Here's where I sway. I agree with the statement that students should be, not being overly compensated. If you're getting a free deal or a full ride to college, a lot of our kids can't get that. So if you're already getting that and you're playing your favorite sport at this level, that in itself is a gift. Now, where I do love NIL and I think that players should be able to make money, brand endorsements. If a brand reaches out to an athlete, I think it's all fair game. Pay them. Let them make their compensation. Obviously, where the unfairness is going to come into play is that's going to only give our big stars that ability, as our lower athletes are not going to get as much recognition and not going to get these deals. Social media being another platform, I think that players should be able to capitalize on that being a secondary career and outlet. We see it with athletes all the time now, day in the life of a D1 player. We see it all the time, and it's great. So now here's the thing, where I think me and you will kind of find this common ground and fill the gray area. I don't think they should be paid the level of NFL players, as the goal is to prepare you to get to the pros, and you should not yet be treated as one. So I think there should be some compensation for what you're doing, who you are, and the product you're delivering to the NCAA and the American sports consumers. But I think that we've let NIL get a little bit out of hand, and why we have some gray area of why Indiana might be a champion. Right. Why certain players go to certain schools, and why we have power schools with no turnover, and why our history books will have the same 10 schools forever. Yep. So I think the NIL is a lot more to be desired. It is a great controversial topic. I think it can be a very great tool, but can also be the devil at the same time. But I think if there's one thing we've learned here today, it is great for college sports, and it's great as a great conversation to be had. Absolutely. But thank you for listening, and this is our thoughts on why NIL legislation is good or bad for college sports.